The studio lights poured over the Jimmy Kimmel Live stage, bright and warm against the backdrop of deep blue screens and flashing cameras. The crowd was already buzzing, their chatter mixing with the hum of the band. It felt like any other night, but there was something in the air, a sense that something big was about to happen. Jimmy Kimmel stepped onto the stage with his usual calm confidence. He smiled wide, waving to the crowd as cheers rose like a wave around him. His suit was crisp, his expression light, but behind the grin was focus. He moved with the easy rhythm of a man who had done this 1,000 times, but his eyes hinted at something sharper, something brewing just beneath the surface. The audience leaned forward, ready for jokes, ready to laugh. They did not know that tonight's monologue would hit harder than usual. There were no celebrity guests waiting backstage, no light-hearted games, just Jimmy, a microphone, and a story that had already set the country talking. For days, Donald Trump had dominated headlines again. Another bold claim, another televised outburst that stirred both outrage and disbelief. This time he had promised something impossible, something even his closest supporters struggled to explain. Late-night hosts had joked about it, but Jimmy had waited. He wanted the timing to be perfect. Now the moment had come. He adjusted his tie, took a slow breath, and looked straight into the camera. The studio quieted. The laughter died down, replaced by that silent pause before the first punchline lands. Jimmy's voice carried that familiar mix of charm and bite. He started slow, a small jab to test the waters, but there was a spark in his tone. This was not just a joke. This was a setup for something that would ripple far beyond the walls of the studio. The audience could feel it. Somewhere backstage, producers watched the monitors with tense smiles. They could sense what was coming too. Tonight would not be routine. Tonight, late-night television was about to cross into something bigger. As Jimmy leaned in toward the microphone, the lights above him gleamed like a spotlight on a stage built for truth. The air was charged, the crowd ready. A quiet smile crossed his face as he began. This was not just comedy anymore. This was the start of a storm. Jimmy Kimmel started his monologue with a kind of calm control that only comes from years in front of an audience. His smile was easy, his voice smooth, and his timing perfect. The crowd was eager, waiting for the first punchline, and Jimmy gave it to them right away. He began by talking about President Trump's latest public moment, a speech that had taken over every screen and social feed for the last 2 days. Trump had declared something outrageous again, this time claiming that he was the most honest president in history, during a press conference that looked more like a reality show than a political event. The clip had gone viral, with Trump waving his hands, pointing at reporters, and insisting that the media should thank him for saving the country twice. Jimmy replayed the clip on the big screen behind him. The audience laughed before he even said a word. Jimmy looked back at the screen, raised an eyebrow, and said, "You have to admire his confidence. Most people try to be humble when they make history. He just tries to rewrite it while the camera is still rolling." The room erupted. His timing was flawless. Every pause, every grin, felt like a hit landing in slow motion. Then came the sarcasm. He said he is the most honest president ever. Which is bold, considering George Washington could not tell a lie, and this guy cannot tell the truth without a commercial break. The laughter swelled again, but there was something more behind it now. The jokes were funny, but the meaning was sharper. Jimmy's tone started to shift. He dropped the smile for a second, looking directly into the camera as the laughter faded. "But the scary thing," he said quietly, "is that some people believe it. They really do." The crowd murmured, half laughing, half uneasy. The studio lights softened slightly, and the energy changed. It was no longer just comedy. Jimmy was peeling back the surface. The jokes had turned into something else. Each punchline felt like a question hanging in the air. What happens when a leader's words lose all weight? Jimmy smiled again, but this time it was thinner. The warmth stayed, but the edge was clear. "So tonight," he said, "let us take a closer look. Not at the jokes, but at the performance behind them." The audience leaned forward again. They could feel that this was not just another late-night roast. It was the start of something deeper, a careful dissection hidden behind a comedian's grin. Jimmy leaned forward on his desk, that sly grin never leaving his face. The big screen behind him flashed another clip from Trump's latest rally, the one where he claimed that crowds were bigger than ever before, bigger than any president in history. The footage showed empty seats and scattered flags flapping in the wind. Jimmy paused the video at just the right moment, catching Trump mid-gesture, pointing toward a sea of space. He smiled and said, "Look at that." You can almost hear the echoes of all the people who did not show up. The audience exploded with laughter. Then he added, "It looks like a Walmart parking lot on Thanksgiving morning, except fewer shoppers and more lawsuits." The laughter grew louder, mixed with claps and whistles. Jimmy was on a roll. He started weaving together clips from news networks, each one highlighting a new contradiction. One showed Trump promising to release all his financial records. The next clip was from 2 years later, where he said, "Nobody wants to see my taxes, not even me." Jimmy turned back to the camera. "That might be the first true statement he has ever made," he said. The crowd cheered, but there was an undertone of disbelief. The energy in the studio had shifted from simple humor to something electric. Every line Jimmy delivered hit with the precision of a comedian and the weight of a commentator who had had enough. He called out Trump's growing list of legal troubles, his feud with judges, and his endless self-praise. "He talks about himself like a salesman pitching broken mirrors," Jimmy said, his tone half amused, half exhausted. "Every reflection cracks, but he keeps saying, 'It looks perfect to me.'" The crowd roared, but then grew quiet as Jimmy played one more clip. It was Trump insisting that he had never made a mistake as president. Jimmy let the words hang there. The silence stretched. Then he said softly, "That is what makes it dangerous. Because when a person cannot see their own flaws, they stop seeing the truth in anyone else." In the control room, the crew watched the monitors with wide eyes. They knew what was happening. This was no longer a typical late-night roast. It was a live moment of accountability, dressed in humor, but burning with something real. The audience could feel it too. Some laughed. Some clapped. Others just stared at the stage, surprised by how deep the laughter had gone. Jimmy smiled again, his tone steady. "We joke," he said, "because sometimes that is the only way to say what everyone else is too afraid to admit." The applause rolled through the room, long and loud. The fire had caught, and there was no going back. Within minutes of the show ending, the internet caught fire. Clips of Jimmy Kimmel's monologue started spreading across every platform. The first uploads came from audience members who had filmed the segment on their phones. Then came the official show clips, polished and sharp, hitting YouTube, X, and TikTok all at once. The moment Jimmy called Trump a salesman pitching broken mirrors was everywhere. By midnight, hashtags filled timelines. Some were cheering Jimmy on, calling it one of the boldest moments in late-night history. Others were furious, calling him disrespectful, biased, or unpatriotic. Comment sections turned into battlegrounds. One side laughing, one side defending. Both sides typing faster than they could think. Memes appeared almost instantly. Someone edited Trump holding a mirror that cracked with every sentence he spoke. Another posted Jimmy in a superhero cape with the caption, "The Roaster of Truth." News channels picked it up next, replaying the monologue under banners that read, "Kimmel targets Trump again." Overnight, comedy had become breaking news. The reactions kept pouring in. Late-night fans, political commentators, and random viewers all joined the flood of conversation. Some praised Jimmy for saying what others were afraid to. Others accused him of crossing a line. But no one could ignore it. It was everywhere. It had become the story of the night. The narrator's tone softened, observing how strange it had become that jokes now traveled faster than political statements. In a world where attention is everything, one 5-minute monologue had reached millions before the White House press office could even respond. While the internet buzzed, Jimmy was at home, unaware of how quickly his words had spread. He had finished the show, said goodnight to the crew, and gone home like any other night. But far away, in a quiet room lined with gold and marble, a phone screen flickered to life. Trump's aides stood around his desk, whispering nervously. One of them held up a tablet showing the clip. Trump's face tightened as he watched Jimmy's grin freeze on the pause frame. The room felt tense, waiting for his reaction. The phone lit up again. Notifications kept flashing across the screen. Tweets, headlines, hashtags. The internet was roaring. Somewhere, behind that golden desk, a storm was about to begin. While the internet kept spinning out of control, another screen lit up somewhere else in the night. Inside a quiet office wrapped in gold trim and red carpet, Donald Trump was watching the clip in real time. His face shifted from confusion to disbelief, then hardened into anger. The same man who had once thrived on commanding a crowd now sat behind his desk, jaw tight, eyes locked on Jimmy's, smirk frozen on the replay. A few seconds later, the first Truth Social post appeared. It came in all caps, fiery and fast. Jimmy Kimmel is a loser. Total failure. Nobody watches that show anymore. Fake ratings. The next one came just minutes later. Pathetic late night host attacks your favorite president because he has nothing else. Sad. Within 20 minutes, there were 5 posts. Each one louder, angrier, and more defensive than the last. He was pacing now, waving his phone as aides tried to calm him down. He is jealous, Trump barked. He wishes he had my ratings. He cannot handle success. None of them can. The staff exchanged nervous glances, unsure whether to respond or just let him vent. One aide quietly opened Twitter on her laptop, watching the trending list climb. Hashtag Kimmel roast. Hashtag Trump meltdown. Hashtag Mirrorman. Back at the Jimmy Kimmel Live studio, the mood could not have been more different. The crew was still cleaning up after the show, their laughter echoing across the empty seats. Someone scrolled through their phone and froze. He is posting, they whispered, showing the screen to another staffer. Soon, word reached the writer's room. A mix of surprise and amusement spread through the group. Jimmy himself was in his dressing room, sipping water, scrolling through early reactions, still unaware of the storm building on the other side of the country. In that moment, the contrast was striking. On one side, a comedian winding down after another night at work. On the other, a former president raging online, trying to wrestle control of a conversation that had already left him behind. As the night grew deeper, the online tension thickened. Screens glowed everywhere. Supporters flooded in to defend him, critics pushed back harder, and late-night fans kept reposting clips with laughing emojis. The battle lines were drawn, but the studio crew could only watch and shake their heads. They had seen plenty of political jokes before, but this felt different. The audience that had laughed hours earlier had no idea what was happening behind their screens. A simple monologue had turned into a national shouting match. Inside that golden office, Trump typed again, his fingers hitting the screen harder each time. "We'll see who gets the last laugh," he wrote. Somewhere across the city, Jimmy's phone buzzed. The message was waiting. The next morning came with a storm. By sunrise, Trump's posts had already filled every news feed, and by noon, he took things further. Cameras flickered on inside his private office. The shot was shaky, framed too close to his face, his gold curtains glowing behind him. Trump had gone live. His voice started firm, but it cracked almost instantly. "This is what happens when the fake media and failing late-night losers attack your president," he said, gripping the desk. He paused, glanced off-screen, then leaned closer to the camera. Jimmy Kimmel should be ashamed of himself. Nobody respects that clown anymore. Nobody. The feed glitched for a second, his voice cutting in and out. Viewers flooded the comments with laughing emojis, shocked reactions, and memes that spread faster than his words. Within minutes, the video was everywhere. News channels replayed it on loop. The former president lashes out after late-night takedown. Journalists tweeted quotes, comedians retweeted with sarcastic captions, and ordinary people clipped moments like trophies. Each second of the video made things worse. He raised his voice, pointing at the screen as if Jimmy himself were watching. "People love me. People know I am right. The ratings prove it. Everyone knows it. Everyone." His sentences tripped over one another. Sweat gleamed on his forehead. The more he talked, the more the world reacted. Across Los Angeles, Jimmy Kimmel was already back on set, for another night show. The energy backstage was electric. Staff members were whispering, showing each other their phones. The control room buzzed with quiet excitement. A producer finally walked up to Jimmy during rehearsal, holding out a phone with the video playing. He glanced at it, watched a few seconds, and then looked up with a slow, knowing smile. The audience was still filing in, unaware that the most powerful man in the country had just delivered a live meltdown in response to last night's jokes. Jimmy looked at the crowd, then at the camera. The corners of his mouth curled slightly. He said nothing yet, but everyone backstage could see the thought forming behind his eyes. The rivalry that had started with laughter was now live, global, and unstoppable. The contrast was unreal. One man red-faced and shouting at his screen, another calm and composed, quietly preparing to go back on air. As the studio lights brightened and the band struck the first note, Jimmy leaned back in his chair. The producers watched from behind the glass, barely holding in their laughter. The tension was electric, but he was ready. Comedy and power had just collided, live for the entire world to see. The audience was already cheering before Jimmy even started speaking. The news had broken just minutes earlier. Everyone in the studio knew Trump had gone live in a furious rant, and the clip was spreading faster than wildfire. Jimmy's producers gave him the signal, and he adjusted his microphone, his face calm but his eyes sharp. The crowd went silent in anticipation. He looked straight into the camera and said, "Well, I was going to start tonight by talking about pumpkin spice season, but it seems the former president beat me to the meltdown." The audience erupted with laughter. He paused for a beat, letting it sink in, then added, "I guess he saw last night's show and decided to hold a press conference from his bathroom." The laughter grew louder, rolling across the stage like a wave. Jimmy did not rush. Every line landed clean. Each pause was deliberate. He had done this for years, but tonight felt different. Every word carried weight because the whole country was watching both sides of this drama play out in real time. Trump's video was angry, raw, unfiltered. Jimmy's response was calm, clever, and surgical. He played a clip of Trump shouting, "Everyone knows I am the best." Jimmy leaned on his desk, squinting at the screen. "It is nice to see he is still doing his daily affirmations," he said. The audience roared again. The tension that had been building all day broke into pure release. Even the crew behind the cameras was laughing now. The control room could barely keep it together as Jimmy delivered line after line with the precision of someone who knew exactly how far to push. He was not just cracking jokes anymore. He was taking control of the moment. At one point, he looked directly into the lens and said, "If the former president is watching, please take a deep breath. Maybe watch a little Disney Channel. It might help." The crowd rose to its feet, clapping and cheering. The sound was deafening. In that instant, everyone knew this was more than entertainment. This was live television history. The energy, the timing, the courage, it all collided perfectly. Jimmy Kimmel was not just roasting a president anymore. He was standing his ground, rewriting the moment in front of millions. The studio was vibrating with energy. Jimmy stood tall, behind his desk, the lights washing over him in gold and white. The crowd's laughter was still echoing from his last line, but everyone knew he had one more thing to say. The air tightened. You could feel that this moment would be the one everyone remembered. Jimmy smiled, leaned slightly forward, and said, "Some people build their legacy. Others tweeted away one typo at a time." The audience exploded. It was not just laughter now. It was a release of everything that had built up through the night. The sound filled the entire room like thunder rolling in after a flash of lightning. He stood still for a second, letting the applause crash around him. Then he nodded, half grinning, half serious, and said softly, "We are living in strange times. At least we can still laugh about it." The camera zoomed out as the crowd rose to its feet. Everyone in the room was clapping, shouting, cheering. Crew members high-fived in the background. The energy felt electric. Behind the scenes, the producers were already watching the online numbers climb. The clips from the show were blowing up faster than anything they had ever seen. Within an hour, Millions of views were pouring in. Comment sections were packed with people calling it Jimmy's best moment ever. The clip of his final line spread across every feed like wildfire. Trump's team went quiet. No more posts. No more rants. For the first time that week, his phone stayed dark. The silence spoke louder than any reply. Jimmy closed the show with a calm wave and that same sharp smile. He had turned a night of chaos into victory. The laughter had done its work, and the world was still echoing with it as the screen faded to black. By morning, every news outlet in America had turned the moment into breaking headlines. Clips of Jimmy Kimmel's broadcast played on repeat across networks. Commentators argued endlessly. Some said it was comedy at its sharpest. Others said it crossed the line of respect for the office. The debate burned through the day, fueled by millions of clicks, and a nation split between laughter and outrage. Inside Trump's circle, chaos was brewing. Advisors rushed to craft a response, but every draft sounded weaker than the last. One aide leaked that Trump wanted to sue the network. Another claimed he was preparing a fiery comeback speech. Yet nothing official came out. The silence was heavy. It felt like a retreat. Meanwhile, late-night comedy found its rhythm again. Kimmel was calm, collected, and strangely reflective the next night. He opened the show with a smile and said, "I was only telling the truth, but sometimes the truth makes people very loud." The audience cheered. It was not about mocking anymore. It felt like balance had been restored, even if only for a moment. The narrator voice cuts in, painting the contrast. On one side, a man red-faced with fury, pacing alone in his mansion. On the other, a comedian standing steady under the bright studio lights. One shouted into the void. The other made the world laugh at it. That contrast became the story itself. People began to ask deeper questions about satire, power, and truth. Could comedy still hold those in power accountable? Could laughter reveal what politics tried to hide? The show had become more than entertainment. It had become a mirror. As the week ended, the headlines faded, but the echo of that laughter did not. It lingered far beyond the studio walls, a reminder that sometimes the sharpest truth arrives with a smile. In one unforgettable night, Jimmy Kimmel proved that words can cut deeper than any campaign speech. He did not just deliver jokes. He held up a mirror to power and made the world watch what it refused to see. That moment was not about ratings or rivalry. It was about truth, courage, and the strange strength of laughter when it meets arrogance head-on. As the studio lights began to dim, Kimmel gave a small wave to the cheering audience. His face showed no sign of gloating, only calm relief. It felt like a full-circle moment. The same stage that began with casual comedy now closed on something much bigger, a cultural reckoning in real time. The sound of applause filled the air, not just for the humor, but for the honesty behind it. The narrator's tone softens, reminding us that laughter has always been more than entertainment. It is resistance. It is release. And sometimes, it is the only way to tell the truth without shouting. In that single night, Kimmel reminded everyone that comedy can be both a weapon and a shield, cutting through ego while protecting what matters most: freedom to speak, to question, to laugh. If you believe truth deserves a spotlight and laughter can still expose power, then hit subscribe, drop a like, and share this story. Because this saga is only getting started, and the next moment of truth might happen sooner than anyone expects.